Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Biblical Perspective. We're doing an We've got an exciting topic for you today. Another exciting topic, Ruth. Another exciting
Yes.
topic, and we're starting a series really where we're looking at like the well today's topic is looking at individual actions and how individual actions actually affects other people. And I think it's important for us to recognize this point because we're not islands, and how we live our lives and how other people live their lives does have an impact. And whether that's individually, corporately, or globally, we're going to be looking at it in different dimension. So, how does other people's actions affect us? And why do people sometimes feel punished because of the actions, the faults, the sins of others? So that's what we will be discussing today. So if you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to subscribe, and you can also post your comments and questions in the YouTube chat. So if you've got any
Yeah.
specific question based on this topic, then don't be afraid to post them in the chat. So you're with myself, Colleen, and with Ruth and Pedro, and we will be taking this Bible study with you today. So I will take this opportunity to pray. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this opportunity that we have to study your word. Lord, help us to understand this topic. And I pray, Lord, that we will be able to speak your words. Lord, I pray that this ministry will continue to glorify you and continue to show to share your word with the world. Be with those who are watching. And I pray, Lord, that you'll be able to lead in all things. I ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
So, Ruth, another very exciting topic for us to discuss today.
Yes, it is. And you know what? I think it's one of our most important topics that we're going to be discussing because it's about us as individuals. And it mentions, why am I punished for other people's faults? Right? Because it seems that way. And I want to go straight into it, right? Because I want to make sure that we can drain every ounce of time from this topic. So, why is it that people seem to always be caught up in other people's actions or reactions? Because we're looking at other people's faults, but why are other people affected by other people's faults, caught up in it?
Well, I noticed in your question, first of all, let me greet everybody and wish you a blessed day in the name of Jesus. Now, I notice in your question, you say, why is it that people seem to always be caught in in others' actions or reactions? What I noticed in
Yeah,
this question is you say it seems to always be the case, which
yes,
places you, myself, Colleen, Michael, Nicole, all the people, Valerie, and all the people who are participating with us right now in the same bag. And I believe this is something that they themselves have observed. So it doesn't just seem to be the case. I would say we can relate to the reality that we are very often caught in other people's actions and reactions, and sometimes we bear the consequences of actions that we have not actually initiated or even participated in. So this is a true and valid observation that you have made through that question. Now, this is a vast subject and we can look at it in many different ways, but um, to kick this off, because we'll be looking at different dimensions, as Colleen said, over the next discussions. But to kick this off, and greetings to Ruti G as well. And so to kick this off, I'd like to look at this within a context that we can all really touch with our fingers, knowing that we've been there. Therefore, we can understand that. What is that context? If you look at the theme or the question of global impact of individual actions within the family context, it is straightforward. What do I mean by that?
Mhm.
Who hasn't been caught up or paid for something that a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, a cousin, a relative has done, which we would not have done? We were not sometimes even aware that they have done those things. Yet
Yeah.
we pay the consequences. Why? Because we share some characteristics with those people. Simply, have you heard of the expression being in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Yeah.
Yet some people can lose their lives because they just shared space and time with other people. That's all. So if you look at this within the family context, you can understand that better because more is involved. There is space, there is time, but there is also name, there is also genetics, there is history, there is so much in common that you share within the family context that other people's actions can definitely affect you and make you pay for something you have not done. Now, the first text I want you to look at with me to see that within the biblical context is Jeremiah chapter 31 and verse 29, please.
In those days they shall no longer say, our fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. Okay.
Notice with me that this is a saying that people are saying, and within the context of the book, it is God speaking, and God is saying there will come a time when people will no longer say the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. Now, I'd like to ask you the question, why do you think? So notice first the relationship that's within a family context, right? This is a saying that people are saying. Why do you think people are saying this? And what could be or what could have been the origin of that? It's a question I'm throwing to you.
Okay. So it's parental sin and the children are actually caught up in it. And the
Yeah, I
children are
think
not
Okay.
actually involved.
yeah.
Yeah, go
It
on.
seems as though it's often to do with hereditary as well. Like actually certain traits being passed down, genetic traits. Sometimes it's like genetic wise, sometimes it's like environmental.
That's good, and but that's really good. But I want you to think maybe specifically about the saying itself. Why would people come to have this saying, which is the fathers have done something, the children are bearing the consequence? Why would they have that? Why would they say this? Why would that become a proverb in their community?
Potentially because of experience, because of what's been witnessed.
Okay. You saying potentially. Do you really think it's potentially?
No.
So are you saying then this is a reality that
Yes,
even
it
in the
is.
Bible we see that it is established within the family context that others' actions are of consequence to others, or some
Mm,
actions, or the
yes.
actions of some are consequential to others who have not actually participated in those actions.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
Mm,
so yeah, go ahead.
And it's not just biblical. I mean, we actually see it even in today's terms when, if somebody upsets somebody else, they go after the children. If a parent does something wrong, they will go after the parent, they'll go after the children, or they'll wipe out the whole family when it's not the rest of the family's fault. So,
So it comes very clear. It becomes very clear to us that
mhm,
once you share some characteristics, and today we're talking within the family context, just
yeah,
being part of a family engages
mm,
your integrity, engages your your person, engages your life in relation to the people around you. This is just
mhm,
a fact. And this
mm,
is what we want to establish first. This is not something you can escape. And the Bible is telling us this is so true to these people who are speaking at that time that they came up with that proverb to say, if your father eats sour grapes, you as a child, you are going to have your teeth set on edge. Now, to further this, could you read for me in Exodus chapter 20, verses 5 and 6, please? What is there?
You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments.
That's an interesting picture here. While you're looking at the text, think of what we've just said. This text is saying God Himself, when He looks at people, I don't know how many people are in that picture, but let's imagine you have there 2 million people. And those 2 million people are separated by names and by families. So you have a number of families who create this big crowd of people. And imagine that God is, as we're looking at this picture, just looking. God is just looking at the masses there. He's just looking at the millions of people there. And He comes up with what you have in verse 5. What does He say? I visit, I
mm,
see. I know some translations say, I punish. But I like to remain with what the King James is saying because it seems to me it is closer when you look at it to what God is really expressing here. And I'd like you to see that the fact that it is closer in the light of what we have just said. When God says, I visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me. What he is saying is, what the parents do, the way they live their lives, the choices they make, generally speaking, it naturally and automatically affects those who come after them. That is their children. And when they have taken a route that is against the will of God, this is being perpetuated. That's why in psychology, you often hear that the children repeat the behaviors of the parents. Let's say if you have a husband who beats his wife, for instance, the likelihood is, we're not saying it's in every case, but the likelihood is the son who grows up in that home will do the same or will have the tendency to do the same. And that can go on from generation to generation. Now, what I want you to retain from what I'm saying now is this then happens in continuity. But there is also discontinuity. You can have the child who will say, because I saw what happened between mom and dad, I will never ever do that. Therefore, the child grows up and never does that. But what we are looking at here is whatever decision is made, whether in continuity or discontinuity, that decision is made because of the experience within the family.
Yeah.
Are you with me? So, if the child goes on not to beat the wife or not to beat the husband, it happens too.
Yes.
It will be in discontinuity to the experience of childhood in the family context. But that may come with a twist, because that husband or that wife can decide, I will never get into any argument, or I will never do anything that could cause a disagreement so that I do not come to this point. And right there, you just have another expression of dysfunction based on the experience of the father to the child.
Yeah.
Are you with me? So,
Yeah.
one way or another, we are caught up, discontinuity or continuity. We're not yet discussing why this is so. We're just making the observation, right?
Yeah.
This is what happens. You wanted to say something?
Yeah. Yeah, and also and we can add the father's name, because if the father's done something bad, they'll go, oh, that's so and so's son. And it's like the poor child now is carrying that name as a negative, which is quite sad, really. So,
Excellent point. To show that there is always a background.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter what your mentality is. What we are establishing here is you cannot escape the background reality. Whether it is continuity or discontinuity, you cannot escape it. I'd like to take an example for you. on continuity and discontinuity and how it affects. If you go to Second Chronicles chapter 28 and you read verses 1, 2, and 27 for me, please.
Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did not what was right in the eyes of the Lord, like his father David, but walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. He even made molten images for the Baals. And Ahaz slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city in Jerusalem, for they did not bring him into the tombs of the kings of Israel. And Hezekiah, his son, reigned in his stead.
All right, there is plenty to say there, but I want you to focus on one thing. When you look at the first verse, it speaks about who? Ahaz, right? Gives you
Yes.
the information, his biography, if you like, how old he was when he became king.
Mhm.
But then in the last sentence, you have a whole resume, if you like, of what his life was.
Mm.
What is it, the last sentence of verse 1? Quickly.
He did not do what was right in his eyes, like his father, in the eyes of the Lord, like his father David.
He did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord like his father David did.
Mm.
Now, if you look at the distance generationally between David and Ahaz, you have about
Mhm.
15 generations. So you ask yourself the question, why is it that the writer here is talking about Ahaz and David as if they were first and second
Contemporaries.
generation, father and son?
Mm.
The idea is there is always a background in
Yeah.
continuity or discontinuity, because such is the nature of life. As you rightly said at the beginning, no one is an island. And even if you don't see what is under the water around the island, this island is connected to another continent or another island under the water. This is the idea here. This is an inescapable reality. There is always a background. Now, if you go back to the text and you look at the last verse, verse 27, it says, Ahaz slept. That means he died.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last sentence says, and Hezekiah his son reigned
Mm-hmm.
in his stead. So he's dead, and his son
Mm-hmm.
now reigns. So let's summarize. Ahaz is in discontinuity with his father David. Yeah, but David is brought into the picture so that you can see who Ahaz really is in the eyes of the writer. That's the point he is making. Last verse, he's dead, his son, now Hezekiah, reigns in his stead. Can you now read for me Second Chronicles 29, verses 1 and 2, please?
Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done.
Did you read verse 2?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to the text, please. We need this text. Okay. So, is there continuity or discontinuity between Ahaz and Hezekiah, his son?
Discontinuity.
Yes, I don't think you read verse
Is that
2.
the right is that the right text there? Because I
It's
can't.
it's not the right text. No, it's not the
That's
right
right.
text.
I thought not.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
text that I read. Yeah.
All right, okay. So are you saying, is there continuity or discontinuity between Hezekiah and his father Ahaz?
There was discontinuity.
It was
No, I think
discontinuity because there's
no, sorry.
discontinuity between A. Can you hear us?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's discontinuity because he said that he did all according to his father David had done.
So we don't have this text here. This text, this is in verse 2. We need verse 2.
So verse 2 said, "And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done."
Thank you. So you're saying we have discontinuity, right?
It's both. It's both.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell us.
Okay, because he discontinued his father Ahaz's wickedness, but he continued with with the righteous works of his father David. So it's
Thank you.
both.
Thank you. This is making the point I'm making. In the first one, this is one lineage, this is one family.
Mm-hmm.
David is the one who starts the whole thing, from what the writer is saying. And everybody else is judged according to David. It doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
14 or 15 generations. You have discontinuity between Ahaz, the 14th generation after David, and David. And then the 15th generation, you again have discontinuity between Ahaz and Hezekiah, his son, right after him. But the writer goes back again to David to establish continuity. What I'm trying to say is there is always a background that runs within the family lineage. And this is
Mm-hmm.
something that is inescapable in human reality. We may not be aware of that. We may not fully understand that. Hezekiah and Ahaz, I guess, never even saw a picture of David. They knew about him in records, but I don't think they even saw a picture of him, or they might have if there were painters around. Yeah? But they are both measured, evaluated,
Yeah.
and spoken of in the light of David's character and actions
Yeah.
and life. Are you with me? Now,
Mm-hmm.
this establishes, again, I say, a very important point. We were discussing, why am I punished for other people's faults? You cannot escape the reality of being caught up in something that you did not initiate, or sometimes you did not even participate in, because such is the nature of life. Nobody lives in isolation of nobody on this planet. And we're not discussing yet why, but there is a reason why. Now, I want you to read another text for me, which is 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 33, please.
And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the ascent of the tombs of the sons of David. And all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did him honor at his death, and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead.
Okay, now Hezekiah did what was right, And now he
Yeah.
is dead, and another one comes up to the throne, and his name is Brother Manasseh. Now, read
Mm.
for me, please, in Second Chronicle chapter 33, verses 1 and 2, please.
Okay. And it says, and Manasseh was 20 years old when he began to
12.
reign, and
12.
was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominable practices of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel.
Wow. Now,
Mm.
is that continuity or discontinuity between
That
Both.
Hezekiah and Manasseh?
that's
Oh,
continuity.
discontinuity. Discontinuity. Oh, sorry. No, discontinuity.
Well, it is
Because
discontinuity. Even Simon's picture shows us its discontinuity. Why?
because it did the same thing as his father Ahaz. Ahab. Is it Ahaz? Yeah.
No, Hezekiah is his father, and Hezekiah did what was right in the eyes of the Lord.
Yeah,
Yeah?
but this one, Manasseh, did the same thing as Ahaz.
Yeah, but let's talk about his father. Is it in discontinuity or continuity with his father?
Discontinuity.
Discontinuity.
There is a stark contrast, and we will stay for a little while on this particular case of Manasseh because it is important for what we're dealing with. But we can say, to begin with, that again, here is somebody who is good, and he
Mm.
raises a child, and this child is going to be evil.
Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah? And he's going to be the worst king Judah ever had in terms of what he's going to do. The most evil things on the planet in the history of the southern kingdom of Judah. This is the guy who did it, Manasseh. Now, why is it important to notice that he started to reign at the age of 12? Now, before I go into this, let me just say this. Let us establish the fact that you are always coming from somewhere, and your life experience is shaped, whether in continuity or discontinuity. Remember, we're talking about being punished for other people's actions or bearing consequences for other people's decisions. Your life experience is shaped, whether you understand it or you don't, by the experience of people around you. And we're
Yes.
talking about this within the family context so that all of us can relate to that. And we said there are two dimensions: continuity and discontinuity. Okay?
Yes.
So nothing happens in your learning of life, to finish with that section, nothing happened in the context of life learning in isolation. Nothing in
True.
your life happens in isolation. You're not isolated from others. You share time, space, and experience with other people, and that shapes you.
Pedro,
So,
there are
you
a
got any
few
comments?
comments
Colin?
that have
I was
come
going to
in.
say.
Yeah. So one of them initially said it's biblical, and that's when we was talking about like things being passed down. And then there's another comment from Ruti G, and it says the sins of the parents visit the children upon the third and fourth generation. And then there's a a comment by Purple Light Touch, and it says, "What came out of the mouth can be detrimental to others." And then there's an interesting comment here by Rooty Gigi, and she said, "Once upon a time, if you had criminals in your family, it affected access to certain jobs," which
Even now.
it again saying yes, even now. And there's another comment. It says, "It also makes me think of the text about the Avenger of Blood."
All right. Thank you for all these comments. They are definitely within what we are talking about.
So, I mean, it's interesting, right, that we have this discourse about why we punish for other people's faults. But are we inevitably involved in what happens to our family members? Why should that really trouble us?
What you have just done with this question is to turn the thing upside down. That means you are asking now, what is the impact of you on others? Because we started with other people being impacted by other people, but now what you asking me is how you impact other people. If you say, are we inevitably involved in what happens to our family members? That's what you're asking, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for that. This is very complex. This is very complex. But let me say, as much as we are individuals and make our own choices in life, it is important to understand that within the family context, we are greatly involved one way or another. We are greatly involved one way or another in what happens to other family members around us. Again, in continuity or discontinuity, the choices that they're going to make will be based on how you impact them, whether you realize it or you don't realize it. Let me take an example for you, and let's go back to Brother Manasseh. Can you read for me in 2 Chronicles 33, verses 1 to 6, and then 9 and 10, please? And we'll stay there for a little while.
Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 55 years in Jerusalem. He did evil in the sight of the Lord and committed the same horrible sins practiced by the nations whom the Lord drove out ahead of the Israelites. He rebuilt the high places that his father Hezekiah had destroyed. He set up altars for Baals and made Asherah poles. He bowed down to all the stars in the sky and worshipped them. He built altars in the Lord's temple, about which the Lord had said, "Jerusalem will be my permanent home." In the two courtyards of the Lord's temple, he built altars for all the stars in the sky. He passed his sons through the fire in the valley of Hinnom, and practiced divination, omen reading, and sorcery. He set up a ritual pit to conjure up underworld spirits and appointed magicians to supervise it. He did a great amount of evil in the sight of the Lord and angered him. Wow. But Manasseh misled the people of Judah, and the residents of Jerusalem saw that they sinned more than the nations whom the Lord had destroyed ahead of the Israelites. The Lord confronted Manasseh and his people, but they paid no attention.
The Lord confronted Manasseh and
Whoa.
his people, but they paid no attention. Can you keep this in mind? And let's go back to the beginning of the text, verse 1, please. Let's talk about Manasseh. The behavior of this man is literally inexplicable. You cannot you cannot explain his behavior unless you pay attention to the chronological background of that story. And that's why I bring you back to verse 1. How old is he when he
12.
starts reigning? Verse
He was
1.
12.
That's a
12.
young man, isn't it?
Yes.
Child.
A child. But we do have stories in the Bible, like Josiah's story. When he started reigning, he was 7. And he was a good king, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yes, he was.
So this one is twice his age almost.
Mm-hmm.
And he is one of the worst kings. You know, in fact, I said a few minutes ago that he was the worst. I said he did the worst things. But he wasn't the worst king. The worst king, in my opinion, was Solomon. You may argue against that, but the worst king, in my opinion, is Solomon. But this one did the worst thing you can ever read in the Bible that a king has done. Okay, in terms of actions. Back to the text, verse 1. He is 12. Right? Tell me, you know the story quickly. Why did he replaced his dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the age of 12. Why
Yeah.
did his why did his dad die?
Because he was old. Was he sick? Was that the one that was sick?
Okay. That's
He
the
had
one that
15
was sick.
He had 15 years longer, so the 15 years had come to an end, and now the son took
All
over.
right. All right. So what you just saying is that Manasseh's dad died 3 years. I mean, Manasseh's dad died when Manasseh was 12, because 3 years before, God had put an expiry date on his life.
Yes.
Not only God had put an expiry date on the life of Hezekiah, because God had said to him, you were going to die. Manasseh was not yet born. And he pleaded with God. And God said, okay, I'm going to add 3 years to your life. Sorry, I'm going to add 15 years to your life. And then in those 15 years, 3 years after, Manasseh was born. That's why he was 12 when his dad died. So
Okay.
not only God had put an expiry date on his dad's life, but God had put an expiry date on his good dad's life. Because Hezekiah was a good guy. Yeah, wasn't he?
Yes,
So now
yes.
I want you to tell me, in the young man's mind, Manasseh, here is a good father. Do you think Hezekiah took good care of Manasseh over those 12 years,
Yes.
knowing that he had an expiry date on his life?
Yes.
Do you think Hezekiah did everything he could to prepare him to become a good king?
Of course.
Do you think Hezekiah poured love? We know already he's a good king. But a good king who knows he's going to die and his son must reign after him. This is a very important feature in kingship. And how you call it, when one succeeds to the other.
Ascension.
Yeah, if you like. It's not exactly the word I'm looking for, but succession. That's the word. He would have put everything in place for this young man to be ready, so that when he becomes king, he doesn't do like Ahaz, his grandfather, but he does like Hezekiah himself or David, the first good king that we have. Now,
Yeah.
look at verse 6 for me now. Read that for me, please.
He passed his sons through the fire in the valley of Ben Hinnom and practiced divination, omen reading, sorcery. He set up a ritual pit to conjure up the underworld spirits and appointed magicians to supervise it. He did a great amount of evil in the sight of the Lord and angered him. Oh
Tell
dear.
me, what do you see in this within the relationship between Manasseh and God?
It's total separation.
Well, if you read the story, and we read that, you can see Manasseh reverses
Yeah.
everything his dad had done.
Yes, he did.
Hezekiah, we read that earlier on, he removed the false gods. He returned the people to God. He brought that relationship close between the people and God. He returned the people to the worship of God. He reunited God with the people. And Manasseh, in verse 6, does the complete opposite. Why? Because,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, carry on. I'm just thinking, boy, where did he learn
This
such
is,
practices?
well, this is nothing else than revenge and resentment against God. And I want you to tell me why.
I'm just thinking of when David, his father, he knew how these people
No,
had a
no,
relationship with
within the story of Hezekiah.
Yeah.
God.
Was it
Okay.
because of the soon passing of his father at a young age?
It cannot be anything else. Look, we have established it is reasonable to think, and we can even be sure about that. Hezekiah was a good king. Hezekiah would have done everything in his power to prepare this young man to be a good king and to do the right thing in the eyes of God. Now he becomes king and he reigns for 52 years, the longest reign. God allowed it. Why did God allow Manasseh to do a reign of 52 years? When you look at the story of what Manasseh did, in verse 10, in verse 6, we have the information. He did that to anger the Lord. In verse
Yeah.
10, we have it. The Lord spoke to him and he would not listen.
Yes. Mm.
You can clearly see that there is here discontinuity between Hezekiah
And
and
God.
Manasseh because of Manasseh's experience with what happened to his father. God took his father away, his good father. God took him away from him. That's all he had in mind. And the
Yeah.
best way to express his disappointment was to turn the people away from God, to the point that he even burned his children, his own children, to idols. I mean, who does that?
Him.
You can clearly see that somehow his behavior is related to how he was affected by the experience of his dad, and how, and this is very often the case when you have people who are dedicated to God and they have children. And you can check that throughout history, both in the Bible and outside of the Bible. Those children very often will depart from the path of God because they would have something against God when something has not turned out for their parents in the way they would have expected because of the faithfulness they knew their parents had towards God. We see that all the time. And here, Manasseh is affected by that. And he goes out intentionally to do all the wrong things he could while reversing everything his father had established. The text is very clear. He reversed. You take a list of what he did and a list of what his father did. It's the exact opposite. It's not by chance. So,
Colleen?
Yeah?
I'm just looking at, have you got any comments? Because I just think,
it says there's some comment from Ruti G, and it says, the king to be start preparation from birth. And she said, and there's a comment from Esther D, and it says, because he died at a young age, he was angry. So that's going back to being angry at God. Rebellious Child says Light Touch Foundation. And Ruti G, did he have trauma? So that was relating to the death of his father as well.
When you look at the text and you see the list of what he did and you compare the list of what his father did, it can only be this. Because remember, Hezekiah would not have left this child to grow without training him properly. Because he knew, we know he was a good king. We know he loved God. We know he departed from the evil ways of his father. There is no way he would have left his child without the knowledge and the training to be a king who honors God. This is impossible. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So the only thing we are left with is resentment, and we can see it in verse 6, we can see it in verse 10, we can see it in the list of things that he did, because it is in complete opposite and opposition to what his father did. Now the point I'm making is this, because you said, your question was, are we inevitably involved in what happened to our family members? Hezekiah, unfortunately, Hezekiah's experience is inevitably involved in Manasseh's experience. The point is, he chose discontinuity, and his discontinuity was based on the life experience of his father. To say we cannot look at Manasseh's experience in isolation from Hezekiah's experience. That's the point I'm making, to show that whether for this or for that, people are impacted by how we live. This is the only point I'm making. For this or for that, for good or for bad, people are impacted by the way we live.
Yeah. That is wonderful. And we could go on, and there's so much to explore. So, how relevant is it then? Is it to understand the impact that we have on others, given all what you've just said? Because we have free
It is
will and free choice.
it is absolutely relevant, because what it does. Okay, let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 31 and read verses 1 and 8 quickly, please. Let's do that in 3 minutes.
Okay. Or it says, Now the Philistine fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa and ate. On the morrow, when the Philistine came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa.
You see, this is another example. How relevant is it? If you take the story of Saul, what we are witnessing here is he's got 3 sons. Leading up to that story, we hear only about Saul's bad choices. In fact, we also hear how good Jonathan, his son, was. But on the day he died on the battleground, Jonathan also died.
Yes.
Do you think there is a link between the choices that Saul made and how he lived his life and the death of his 3 sons?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is the point that we are making. Whatever happens in life, and that can be continuity or discontinuity. We talk about, why do I pay for other people's faults? It's because of how life is set. This is inescapable, and it is relevant for us to understand that, because it makes us aware of what kind of choices that we need to make in life. Because one way or another, it affects others. A last text quickly. Proverbs 4:23, please.
Keep thine heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. That's a King James Version. Guard your heart with all diligence, for from it are the sources of life. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. That's a New Living Translation. Keep your heart with all diligence, for from it flows the springs of life.
Notice here that the NLT says your life, but all the others are not saying this. So on this one, I only put the NLT there so that you can understand that we need to look beyond ourselves. While it is true for your own life, the other versions, the KJV, the NET, the RSV, say the sources of life. Why? Because it's never just about your life. It's also about the lives of others. When you keep your heart, it's not just for you, it's also for others, because one way or another, others are going to be affected, and they are going to take decisions in continuity or discontinuity. Let me stop here.
Okay, that is wonderful. And you know what? I'm still taking it all in, because it's a new, it's a, not even a new concept. It's a new way of looking at, why am I punished for other people's faults? And the viewers were actually, the comments actually proved that as well. And that's why, viewers, this word, the word of God, is where you will find hope for your future with your children, your grandchildren, whoever, but also free will and personal choice that they make is where it's at as well. So I want to say thank you, Pedro, Colleen, and Simon, and especially the viewers, because your comments were wonderful, and and your questions are wonderful. Wonderful. I want to thank you for that. And we'll see you again next week for another session with TBP. Have a safe week, and may God bless you. Thank you.